The year is 1991. The location, remote Siberia, Russia. A group of scientists are embarking on a drilling expedition to dig as deep can go. For 9 long and grueling miles, they drilled straight down, further than any other man had gone before. However, when the drill hit the 9-mile mark, something peculiar happened. The bit began to shake and to convulse, as if it had hit an open cavern. The startled scientists began to check the readings from the drill bit. The thermometer read a whopping 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 times hotter than the temperature of lava. But that wasn't the most frightening discovery, not by a long shot. Microphones attached to the end of the drill bit recorded the deafening sounds of what seemed to be screaming, wailing, and tormented crying from humans. These horrifying sounds led to only one explanation. The scientists deduced that they had drilled directly into hell itself. What would crawl up out of that hole and what would become of this so-called well to hell has haunted those scientists and the Siberian backcountry for decades. And today I will be exploring this Russian legend, its origins, its real-life story, all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's hop into it, shall we? This video is sponsored by no one at all, actually. There's nobody. Just wanted to pop in and tell y'all to have a good day and to not stress over the small things that you can't control. Life is a river. Do not cling to its banks. Anyways, back to the video. The story I read you in the beginning of this video is a creepypasta from the late 80s and early 90s. Which is really early as far as, creepypastas go, but as usual with these types of things, they're rooted in some sort of real-life story, something that actually happened that made manifest this creepypasta. So today, there will be 2 parts to this video, the real story and then the creepypasta version. First, let's dive into the real-life story of digging to the depths of hell that actually happened. The Kola Super Deep Borehole, 1970. The Kola Borehole is the final name that's been given to a Soviet-sponsored drilling project from 1970. Just like the creepypasta, this drilling happened in remote Russia on the Kola Peninsula. Scientists began this experiment with one single goal in mind: to bore the deepest hole in human history. I'm sure there's a your mom joke somewhere in here, but I can't find it. Drilling began on May 24th of that year using something called the Uralmash 15,000 drilling rig. This rig was normally used for digging really deep oil wells, but for the purposes of this mission, it was modified to dig even deeper. The machine would go on to dig for 9 years after its starting date. The diameter of the boreholes that the machine dug were 9 inches or 23 centimeters, and the deepest of these boreholes reached an astounding 40,230 feet, or 7.6 miles down. In 1979, that hole became the deepest borehole ever reached by mankind, and then 10 years later, in 1989, it was named the official deepest man-made hole in history. Not sure why it took 10 years to do that, considering it already happened, but whatever. And to this day, it remains the deepest borehole dug by mankind. Drilling in these boreholes was stopped in August of 1994 due to lack of funding, which means for 24 years, it was all operational. As a result of these scientists digging borehole after borehole just to see and examine what was in the ground, the drilling revealed several interesting findings. Mainly, the lack of something called the basaltic layer that scientists had theorized were down near the 6-mile range. They thought that at 6 miles down, there should have been a thick layer of this basaltic stone, and there wasn't any at all. Instead, there were many more hard rocks and granites at much deeper depths than previously thought. Another unexpected discovery from this expedition was that there were water pools 3 to 6 kilometers deep in the ground. Again, originally, scientists didn't believe that aquifers could be this deep, and now they believe many exist even deeper. As I said, in late 1994, the project was shelved and abandoned, mainly due to lack of funding, but also because the company that was doing it was liquidated and dissolved. And everything from the actual drill site, the machines, all of it was abandoned. The holes were capped off and welded shut with thick metal lids so no one could fall down or drop something down, and everything regarding the deepest hole of all time was forgotten to the histories. What is deep inside of the earth has fascinated people for centuries, and so many different experiments have tried to find the answer as to what is actually at the core of the earth, what is actually under our feet, miles below. The United States in their project Mole Hole was a similar expedition. The German continental borehole is a similar one as well. And recently, in 2023, China actually began to dig a super deep borehole into the Tarim Basin, looking for oil and gas and for scientific exploration. It seems that scientists from all around the world and all walks of life want to see what is below us, and they have this morbid curiosity as to what is at the core of our planet and what secrets it might hold. As cool as the Russians are for simply digging a 9-inch hole 7.5 miles down, the findings were not as scary as the well-to-hell creepypasta implies, and the researchers certainly did not dig into hell itself. But it does beg the question, what's actually deeper than the hole they dug? What is below that 7.6 miles? Could we actually find the biblical hell, like the creepypasta implies, or is something far more dangerous and more macabre lying dormant down there that we shouldn't awake? And most of all, how did a horrific story like the well-to-hell creepypasta come from a seemingly innocent drilling expedition by a bunch of cold Russians in the late 1900s? Let's examine the origins of that creepypasta and find out how it morphed into the very common tale that we know today. Sometime in late 1989, someone somewhere wrote a story similar to the creepypasta I read at the beginning of the video. A tale involving Russian scientists who stumbled into hell and recorded the screams of humans. These scientists tried to keep this quiet for decades, but eventually it leaked to the public. It's safe to say this story went viral, especially in the late 80s, of course. It quickly spread its way across many Christian publications as well as broadcasting and other networks as well. All of these networks broadcasting the same story. The Russians dug into hell. What do we do now? With a network called Trinity Broadcasting Network running the story with the ominous title, quote, "Scientists Discover Hell," end quote. The story was so successful that the network ran another broadcast with some new information about this mysterious hellhole. This new information was apparently that some of the geologists that were on the dig reported seeing satanic figures crawl out of the hole. And a quote from this addition to the story reads as follows. What really unnerved the Soviets, apart from the voice recordings, was the appearance that same night of a fountainhead of luminous gas shooting up from the drill site. And out of the midst of this incandescent cloud pillar, a bright being with bat wings revealed itself with the words in Russian, "I have conquered," emblazoned against the dark Siberian sky. With this new addition to the creepypasta, the broadcast networks were in a frenzy. People across the nation believed that Russia found hell itself. The popularity of this mysterious story was growing, and apparently, it seems that humans have always had a curiosity regarding hell, even back in the 80s. The Trinity Broadcasting Network, who aired this story, cited a Finnish newspaper as the original source for it. They say that's where they got it from. They were just relaying the information. The paper was called Amnesia, But of course, that wasn't a real newspaper. That was actually some sort of evangelical magazine publication. And the original person who actually wrote this creepypasta into that magazine ripped it from a real newspaper called the Itella Sumen. That paper has a section specifically for publishings that are not moderated, and pretty much anything flies. There's no checks, there's no run-throughs or anything. It's kind of like social media today. That newspaper, anybody could post to it. So this story was written there because the author knew it wouldn't be taken down, and that's how so many people saw it and heard how we discovered hell. Then the grapevine phenomenon began with all that he said, she said stuff. And after the story of the well to hell made it to the USA, it had morphed into this gut-wrenching story that I read to you earlier. Many early critics of the story likened it to a tabloid newspaper article and nothing more. But then again, there were thousands of individuals who thought that Russia was in cahoots with hell itself. The story was also bolstered by the supposed audio recordings of mangled and tortured human screamings coming from that hole. And these supposed screaming noises actually ended up being fakes, of course, with some cleverly pasted audio clips making it seem more guttural, more loud, and more abundant. But in order to fully understand this creepypasta, I would like you to put yourselves in the shoes of the average person hearing the story from the late 80s. If you were in the late 80s hearing this story, you would hear that Russian scientists, people that Americans didn't exactly have a great relationship with over the decades before, due to several reasons, were drilling down into the core of Earth to greedily try to mine more minerals and irons when they accidentally, due to their own hubris, bored into hell itself. After they retracted the drill bit, demons and fire and ash and smoke ruptured out of the hole and were released back into the world, and Satan's foothold was once again reignited because of the Russians' pride. It would have been extremely scary, to say the least, especially with the fact that they didn't have social media and they weren't as desensitized to this sort of horror that we are. They didn't have creepypastafandom.com, and they didn't have Mr. Nightmare on YouTube narrating stories to help you sleep. That level of morbid curiosity really wasn't a thing back then. So to some, it was real, and to most, it was a horrifying possibility. In a more recent and strange twist of events, another story popped up thousands of miles away in a completely different country about a so-called well to hell, claiming a never-ending hole exists where the screams of the damned can echo through the day and night. This well to hell is in Beirut of Yemen. It is a sinkhole that's around 367 feet deep, which of course is a far cry from the deepness that the Russian borehole was, but the difference is the opening and just the massive nature of this sinkhole is gargantuan. It's astounding, really. The hole was never explored until 2021, when a group of 8 scientists rappelled down into it and captured some stunning footage from the inside. The Beirut hole is steeped in legends, and these legends have been around for thousands of years. Some claiming that the pit is where the sinners go to be tortured for all eternity for their misgivings, and others saying that this hole is the gateway to hell itself, and anybody who ventures down inside of it will die a gruesome death. There's water in the bottom of the sinkhole as well, and the water specifically is steeped in mythos and legend. Whoever drinks the water will die horribly, or their ancestors will suffer for it. But the reason I bring this all up in this video is to show that humanity's fascination with deep holes in hell knows no bounds. A completely different culture and geographical area believes in the horrors of the damned that lie inside of the hole. Just like the creepypasta from the Russian borehole says that they dug into hell. Both of the holes in and of themselves are not deadly fire pits, and both have been explored. But the more interesting implication is humanity's fear and the fact that we're terrified of what lies deep inside of the earth. Where does that fear come from? Surely it began somewhere. Maybe our ancestors saw something and it was so horrifying that it scared itself into our genetic code. Who knows? this creepypasta and urban legend, whatever you want to call it, is a great example of how things can be blown out of proportion. An innocuous mining operation turned into a story of hellfire and brimstone, and digging into places that we shouldn't dig. It's not the first time or the last time that something like this will happen, but it definitely does make for a really cool story to get you thinking. Man's greed and man's ever longing to dig deeper and to go higher, and constant desire to explore more and more, might eventually lead to us as a society digging into our own sort of hell. And whatever crawls out of that might not be very agreeable to us. I don't know, it's just something to think about. As the old saying goes, pride cometh before the fall. When will the greed of mankind end? So that was the well to hell creepypasta and the real life application and story behind it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, leave a like, it's free, it helps push this video out, helps push the channel out. I am aiming for 100,000 subscribers by May, because May is my birthday. And it would be amazing if you wanted to support the channel in any way. This is a passion project channel of mine. It's my third channel. I just love making these kind of videos on here. It's so nice to just make these documentaries. I love it. Lots more stuff coming in the future. So many things I'm planning, so many things I'm ready to create. Hopefully y'all are ready. Thank you for the amazing support. With all that said, tell somebody you love them. Life is too short not to. And remember, pride is the worst human vice. Don't dig too deep and don't reach too high, because flying too close to the sun is as bad as digging into hell.